So much for joining. Thank you all for joining today for our panel on game day prep. We're really excited to have you all. I'm Rachel Coe. I'm Associate Director for Strategic Communications at Purdue University. I'll be moderating today's call. I'll go around with everybody else who is on the panel so they can introduce themselves. Brandon, we'll start with you.
All right, Rachel, thank you. Thanks everyone for hopping on today. My name is Brandon Vickrey. I am at Valpo University here in Northwest Indiana. I graduated from Valpo in 2016 and I slid into a full-time role here at that time. So now I've been at Valpo for 7 years and 10 years total, counting undergrad. And I work with football, men's basketball, baseball, tennis, golf, track, and cross country here at Valpo.
Denise.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Denise Archetto. My current role is the Assistant Athletic Director for Strategic Communications at UNC Greensboro in North Carolina. My kind of session of getting to this point, I graduated from a Division III school, was a student athlete there. Post-grad, I had a year at Harvard University. It was kind of a post-grad internship, covered a few sports there. Very cool experience, obviously, 42 sports. After that, I did 5 years at Division II school, Stonehill College in Massachusetts. Had about half of our sports. There was only 2 of us. And then last year, I was a step below my current title as an assistant, and then was promoted to this title this past summer. So very excited to be here and excited to hear your questions.
I'm Jordyn Ballard. Thank you guys for joining us today. I am the Associate Director of Communications at Kansas State. I've been here for 6 months, just knocked out my first season with baseball, where I'm the baseball and volleyball contact here. I've spent the last 6 years at D2 at Black Hill State, was at Gannon University for a little bit, and then most recently was at West Texas A&M for a few years.
All right, perfect. Well, everyone, just want to reiterate that you please feel free to put questions throughout the session, or as our panelists are talking, feel free to add in some questions into the chat that has been created. I'm happy we'll help read those out as the session is going on. For an overview for today, we're going to start with key items for the game day checklist. We will also be talking about, feeling overwhelmed on game day, how we can deal with that and ways to go about combating stress with those. We'll also talk about how we prioritize our needs, as well as how we are able to maximize our help on a game day setting. If there are questions outside of that you guys have in and around game day, feel free once again to add those in to our session. So first, I would like to go around with everyone and check in to see how we prioritize our game day checklist and what are those key points that you guys are looking for to be able to execute.
I'll jump in first. It definitely varies throughout kind of all the divisions, all the different conferences, kind of how and kind of by location of where you are, especially if there's a lot of media that has attention to your school, if there's kind of minimal media, if you have a big student worker population. So there's definitely a lot of different variables that come into, can vary for your checklist, and you'll kind of see that as we talk. So that's kind of a big piece of, the different ideas between the 3 of us. One thing there's a few things that I kind of do as I, jump into game day. One thing I really harp on, especially like with my staff now, is you want to make a loop. I make a loop with everyone that I interact with, that I may interact with. Not only does that help professionally for you and keep those relationships, you never know where it's going to end with, but also, you want to make sure your PA has pronunciations. Obviously, you want home court advantage for that matter. You want to have our student athletes have a great environment to be in. So obviously go to PA, go to your broadcasters, talk to your photographer if you have one, have those key moments in mind. Is there something that you're looking for the photographer? You want to go to the scorers table, make sure that they're set and, they're kind of looking at it. Make sure you talk to, if you have a marketing person, make sure you're talking to your marketing person. If you have senior day, if you have a special presentation at the beginning of the game, you're just talking to those people and constantly having that strong communication so that that event can run as smooth as possible. Some other details along with that, or as another thing, you want to have all your equipment lined up. You want to make sure ahead of time that your stats computer is working. You have the charger, if you're doing social, have your social computer or your computer ready to go. Make sure you're logged into what you need to be. You also want to make sure you have, your printers ready. You have your ink, you have extra paper, you're being ready for whatever may come your way. Another thing that I like to do is have a piece of paper and pen ready. I'm always, even though, it's kind of a little old fashioned, but have a piece of paper and pen ready so that if stats go down, you're ready to write. And that's kind of how I started as a student worker. And now I still do that today, no matter what sport it is, even if it's volleyball and you're inputting every detail. Those are some of my main things that I do ahead of game day.
It is definitely important. I always think to have that pen and paper ready to go. It does come in handy even when some days you think everything's running smoothly, you never know. And I think that's a good lesson too, just, to always have a pen with you wherever you're going, because media might have needs that come up, things like that. So definitely a good point to have. So Jordyn, I'm curious too about home versus away needs and what that looks like and how those can change as well throughout thinking through your game day checklist.
Yeah, so for me, here it's a little bit differently. For home games, I don't have nearly as many tasks as I do on the road. I'm fortunate enough, I'll have somebody running social media for me, and then I don't need to worry about the broadcast or anything. So for home games, I'm strictly just working about dealing with the media, press conferences, post-game conferences, the press releases and stats, and then also the video board and scoreboard and making sure that that's all correct. So here I actually run, I input all the stats for baseball and volleyball. So mostly my focus during the game is on stats, and then making sure that the scoreboard and our video board stats and my stats all match up together. And then also making sure, getting context messages with our radio PA and our ESPN broadcasters, making sure that they all have the correct information on everything going on, especially my game notes, make sure that everyone's in sync. And then on the road, don't have to worry about stats much, but still monitoring them just to make sure that they have the correct, cap files, making sure they have all of our correct information for the opposing SID, make sure they're good. And then I run our social media when we're on the road. So it's, depending on which school and also which sport you're working with, sometimes men's basketball, women's basketball, football, they'll have a full staff traveling with them. Whereas baseball, usually it's just me and our radio broadcaster that are traveling. So I'm focusing on kind of all of the media efforts on that side, whereas some people are just only have to worry about traditional SID stuff, where mine is towards creative content.
Okay, we have a couple questions that have already been submitted. I'll go first with Eric's, and then I have a question as well for Antonio. Eric's relates a little bit more to what you were just talking about. So between the three of you, what advice and strategies do you have for recruiting and training new game day workers, especially stat inputters and scoreboard operators? or Denise, were you about to say something? Because if not, I also
I
jump
guess
in
it
there.
depends. I'll speak on maybe the professional, like contracted people that you take outside. NCAA Live Stats has some great resources. You can utilize that platform. They have a lot of training. They have a lot of great videos to watch. And the download is also free, so anyone can put it now on any computer. So that's a great resource for people. I still see a point to learn Stat Crew. I think it was beneficial to me, but that's also because I transitioned from Stat Crew to NCAA Live Stats. But anyone that's jumping into stats, I think NCAA Live Stats is a great and easy program to utilize. And it's going to be, the next best thing for us and for all of the athletic departments. So I think that's a really big key. They used to do a bunch of in-person training, but I know they've done a really great job with their website and having those trainings available to everyone. In terms of scoreboard operators, if you do have someone that has kind of been your scoreboard operator, this is in terms of like students. If you have someone that's been in there before, have that new person sit with them. I think that's the best and easiest resource for you. In terms of if you don't have someone, hopefully they know the new persons know the sport, or you can sit down with them. Summer's a great time if they're able to get to where you are, or Zoom's obviously the capability now, so you can kind of teach them the sport, and knowing the sport is kind of half the battle and what they're trying to do for the scoreboard. I'll let someone else jump in if you guys have anything for more student workers.
Yeah, I think that the recruiting and training student workers is always a challenge across all levels, but I think it's kind of a fun challenge to attack because you get a chance to influence people that hopefully ultimately want to join our workforce and be in our industry and that are interested in what we do. So I always enjoy that part of it. I like to try to ease people in where the first time they're scheduled, they're not in this key essential role. They're observing and learning and to build some time for that learning curve, especially when it comes to stats. Maybe we're adding in a student that's an extra spotter at first before they're the main spotter, and certainly before they're inputting the stats. So I think just from the training standpoint, trying to build those opportunities for them to learn, and also trying to identify what exactly each student is most interested in and utilize their skill sets in a way where they most benefit us and them. I think for me personally, I lean more on students for social media. So in game for a home game, I'm going to handle the inputting of the stats. But I'll look to a student to run our in-game social media from our team accounts for a home event. At some places that might be the opposite. So it depends on kind of your own skill set and the student skill sets as well. So I think just strategically thinking about how they can best help you. Certainly if it's a student that wants to be in the industry, how you can give them a well-rounded experience where they learn a little bit of everything, but also how you can put them in a position to succeed where you're not throwing students too much into the fire, into spots where they're not in a position to succeed. So I find that students on social media is a good place for them. I find them to be better than I am at some of the captions and things of that nature. But I think it's finding those different ways to strategically staff your game, thinking about what role you're best at doing, what role some of the other help, if you have the opportunity to outsource a certain role or two, but maybe you can strategically think about which roles you're using students on and which roles you're not.
I think one other thing that I think back to when I was a student worker, the best way that I learned stats was hopping on a computer. Not only was I thrown on a live computer, but once I got into basketball season, when it was a little bit more chaotic, obviously it's more stats to keep track of. My sports information director pulled out a kind of a dummy computer, and we would have, those would be the non-live stats. It would just kind of be a test run. And with NCAA Live Stats, you can do that now. Unfortunately, you do have to take some time to put in all the jersey numbers and whatnot, but it's still an opportunity for them to hop on a computer, and it's while the game's going, and it's a test run for them. It's a time for them to learn, and yes, flags will come up, but that's when you can teach them.
Agreed. And if they have time outside of that too, doing test games, like pulling up YouTube games of like whatever sport it is, that was one thing that my SIDs had also taught me back when I was learning softball stat crew a handful of years ago. She would just sit down with like the computer and then put on like fake games. And then that's how you learn or rebuild, take a play-by-play sheet and then rebuild that by inputting. So those are a couple ways we can do. You guys can be able to teach new people coming up in it. We'll move on now to another question. We've got a handful of questions here, so keep them coming, you guys. This is good because we want to make sure we're hitting on things that you want to talk about. Antonio asks a question for Denise. He's making a jump from D3 to D1. What was the biggest adjustment for you making that jump?
First of all, breathe. That's one thing I wish I had known, just to breathe, take it in. It's going to be a lot, especially depending on, the size that you were in for D3. D3, I was a student worker, but I took on a very large role because we had 3 sports information directors in my 4 years as a student worker. So I was kind of a really big hand for those that were coming in and taking over our department. And that was a 1-person shop. So to have a whole bunch of student workers was a really big, important part of that department. But I just say, just breathe. To me, it was hard. I don't remember, I didn't do as many game notes, so I can't really speak on the game note side of things. I did help with our with basketballs and ice hockey game notes, but it was just a small piece of those game notes. It wasn't the whole thing. So that was kind of a little bit of a shock for me. But I think everything that we do, once you get into it, it's all the repetition, and that's how you continue to learn and continue to grow, is just all the repetition that we do. I think also another thing is just getting to know all the different roles of a Division I department is going to be a huge help to you, because coming from D3, you kind of do it all. And that's the benefit, because you get to do a lot of different things in Division III. You get to wear so many different hats. And I know we do as well in D1. We're always watching, we're always learning, we're always getting our hands in something. But I think that's where I learned my basis of knowing a scoreboard, knowing how to set up a video camera, just knowing all those little details. And I think that's helped me grow into the role that I have now. And I think another thing is just my big thing jumping the 2 was just having kind of a good structure of what I want, what I need to get done during the day. Putting aside an hour for your preview, if you're a little bit slower, put aside, an hour and a half to try and get your preview done. You want to fill your day as best you can so that you can get your tasks done on time.
All right, great. We have another question as well from Vidath. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but the question is, how far before the season starts do you hand credentials, and does that vary by sport? And also, do you have a deadline?
I think one thing in the Missouri Valley Conference that's really nice is the conference office does a credential that's kind of good across the board at all of the facilities in the conference. So prior to the season, the conference office sends out credentials, and that takes one piece of that off our plates. And then it's a matter of distributing those to our media, our radio broadcasters, things of that nature. And it's good for the whole season when people come in home and road. But my thought on a deadline is, from my perspective, I always want to be as accommodating as possible for media that want to cover games, photographers, whether it's student media, things of that nature. We get last minute requests, and we try to ask them to, out of respect for our time, let us know as far in advance of the event as possible. But I tend to be pretty lenient on the deadline. We still allow people to cover the games, even if they're contacting me the day of the event and asking if we can accommodate them that night. As far as how far ahead of time, I think that with any aspect of things that can get done before the season or during the summer or prior to the season starting, it's always good to stay as far in advance of those as you can on our end. But then you also kind of, on the flip side of that, have to be prepared for the last minute requests as well. So I think it's a little bit of both. both as being as prepared as we can, but also be prepared for the last minute person. And maybe the credential doesn't have their name on it, but have some generic credentials ready for those requests that come in at the last minute.
Perfect. Jordyn, you answered earlier a question that I had about home versus away coverage for events. Now, Dan has a question as well along that vein. He works with a D3 school this past year where we couldn't necessarily travel with the team during the regular season. So what are some tips that you have on how you can improve the game day coverage of teams where you can't actually be there in person to cover?
Yeah, so when I was D2, it was I actually tried so hard to get our coverage going well. When we're home, which I try to have at least 1 to 2 photographers constantly at all of our home events, so that what I would do is post kind of like, even if the photos aren't at that specific game, at least there's some kind of content that's going out. Always everything's video, like quick videos now. Highly favored videos that we had were just like all of the in-game clips. Try to do those. Dumb as it sounds, like even just like fun GIFs on social media went a long ways. People loved them, and my student athletes absolutely loved them. They thought it was hilarious, and so that generated a lot of impressions on like our Twitter and such. And then even just engaging with fans also helps. I worked for a summer league, wood bat league in baseball, and we had a rain out, and so it's like, what are you going to do for 2 hours? I started tic-tac-toe matches with the opposing teams on Twitter, and just through that we gained like 20 followers just because people were trying to see the result of that. So just kind of have fun with it. I think the best thing you can do is, especially like building content, is just you're representing the team, but kind of like show the personality of the team through social media, especially on the road. Are they, build that kind of personal relationship with them, so you get the feel of it, and then it's kind of like, oh, this is how the team would react to this kind of message or something. Just anything you can put out there. There's really no bad content right now, especially with social media. Like everybody's on social media. That's how people are feeding the games. Even if it's not a good score, at least just put something out there, and it could just be like a funny photo and just a quick caption of the score. I remember a few years ago, Colorado State did a final graphic, and they just drew stick figures on like a note and screenshotted it and sent it out. And that generated probably like 200 retweets just because people thought it was hilarious. So there's no dumb way to do something.
I think one thing too, I was able to, you have some relationships, obviously you're building relationships, but, especially the ones in your conference, reach out to them, see if they have a photographer that day, see if that photographer can give you like 2 or 3 pictures, and that, it'll kind of show that you're there, but not there. They may be, even that's for your post game, quick with the recap, like here's some pictures from the day. So that's always helped too.
Perfect. Brooke also has another question before we move on to the outline that we have. But Brooke has a great question though. As an intern at a D2 school looking for a GA position at a D1 school, what are the most important qualities we should have? What should we focus on to help us stand out amongst the others? Brandon, if you want to go take this one.
Yeah, I think how you can help, what ways can you contribute to helping game days across all sports? So typically a GA spot may have specific sports that it's assigned to, but when someone can come in and show that there's some different ways that can really make the lives of the existing staff easier on game day, I think it's fitting with this being part of the answer, since this session is about game days. What can you do as far as social media posting? What's your experience with posting on social media during the game? What's your experience as far as stats? Can you, you might be applying for a GA position where you're the SID contact for soccer, but if you also have the ability to be the stat inputter for men's basketball, that takes one thing off the full-time staff's plate. So I think how you can contribute across all sports and what showing some experience in those different ways to, hey, if I come in, I'm going to make game days easier for you because game days are such a stress factor for full-time staff. So I think some experience that specifically helps in those moments where staffing is such an issue. And then I think just experience working with different sports, and I would look for what experience does the person have with the particular sport that they might be working closely with in the GA type spot. So I think showing some knowledge and some history with the specific sport that the GA spot might be working with would be good as well.
I think that was a great answer, Brandon. And I also thought, you brought up a good point too, and social media as well. And with the direction everything is going in, especially as student athletes have NIL, and D1, can be an important factor for some schools or for some student athletes, depending on, the person. But I definitely also think, social media, in addition to the game day and, the ability to work with other sports. I think, being able to show that, you have some fun or some different ways to look at social media as well, definitely wouldn't hurt in that process as well. So we'll move on now. I think I hit all those questions, so we're going to move on now. So game day is definitely something that can be overwhelming, and there can be a lot of different, directions you're being pulled in at one time. A lot of times, it's the hurry up and then wait. And so, but during that hurry up phase of your game day prep and on game day, a lot of times you have a lot of different things happening at once. So wanted to ask the panel, how do you deal with that? And how do you alleviate the stress associated with having so many different responsibilities? A lot of times that happens simultaneously. Denise, if you want to go first.
Yeah. I think, back to when I initially started speaking to you guys, I think the biggest thing is just being as prepared as possible. Have a checklist yourself, go through it, make sure you have everything you need. Yes, things will come up. I can tell you one quick story. I remember a time Division III as a student worker, our SID wasn't there. They were at a different game and we didn't have any power. So we had to quickly adapt to okay, where's our closest power source that we can use? And it's stressful, but it also helps you grow, and it helps you, you're going to get quick on your feet and come up with different solutions to different problems. So I think as much as you can be prepared, just also be prepared to think quick on your feet. And some of your coworkers can even be a huge support to that. Having someone who's been in the department for a little bit, go to them if they may have a different solution than you, or, have the solution that you may need. So just being able to learn from everyone around you is a huge component of that. And then just trying to think things through, talk things through, everyone always says no idea is stupid. And that's true. You never know what idea could come that might be the solution to your problem.
I agree with that. Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I think another factor with alleviating some of the stress of it is to remember to have fun. Remember that at the end of the day, our job is not, we're not medical professionals. We're not pilots. We don't have we don't have lives in our hands. It's a job that's I think all of us are in it because we enjoy athletics. We enjoy what we do. So I think even in those stressful moments on game days, to try to have some fun with your coworkers and to have ways to joke around a little bit without obviously going too far and distracting from what you need to get done to take care of business. But I think kind of creating a light atmosphere helps with all aspects of it. And it also helps make with kind of the media relations side of our job. I think if you try to not take yourself too seriously when you're welcoming people in for your events, that goes a long way with those individuals as well.
I agree, Brandon. It's really important to keep positive attitudes on everything because everything will work out in the end. No, because we're not doing rocket science here. It does all work out in the end. And so I think like reminding yourself that in that moment is really important, as well as, communicating with the other people that you're working with and around you, because, you might potentially have students there who can be able to take on some of those smaller tasks so you can deal with something bigger, or your marketing person or your game manager might be able to also step in and help out with a few things if something is going on that they might have some knowledge on as well, to be able to help work out those issues, because you never know, as Denise said, what will be a good solution to a problem sometimes, thinking on your feet. So thank you very much. If anybody has more questions, I would say this is the last chance that you guys have, as we're nearing the end of our session. So please feel free to add in any more questions. But I do want to wrap this up with, wanting to know from each of you, what is one piece of advice that you wish you would have known heading into your career as an SID? Jordyn, we'll start with you.
Probably like I have two of the biggest ones is just kind of like keep learning and always be a student. The game's constantly changing. 1 year, what works 1 year might not work the next year. You never know what's going to happen. You never know if someone's going to leave and you're down to being 2 SIDs in, a 14 sport department. You never know what's going to happen. So always just be ready to try new things, try new trends, work for, and then kind of, maybe try some other people's ideas and see if they work for your department. Just constantly be a student. And then probably the biggest one, which I still struggle with, is just remember to take time for yourself. And that a lot of the time it's hard for us to say no, and we pile on a bunch of stuff. And then next thing you know, it's 10 p.m. and you haven't eaten all day, or you forget to sleep well, or, just remember to do those little things, those little self-care things. And that, like everyone's saying, it's not life or death. Some things can wait till the next day, or, it's okay to relax for a little bit and take some time for yourself. I just finished up the season for baseball. And so that's what I'm trying to do this weekend, is first weekend off since January. And it's just like, oh, let's reflect for a little bit. So that is my best advice for everybody.
Thanks, Jordyn. Yeah, it's always nice when you have that breather after the end of a long season. So that is nice. So I hope you enjoy your weekend coming up. Denise, if you would like to go next on the piece of advice you have for everyone.
Yeah, I think one piece of advice that, I tried to do as best as I can. And, you just want to be able to work with everyone who you connect with. We're all doing the same job. And so we want to be able to promote our teams, whether we're on one side of the country or the other, like we're doing the same task. So one thing, I kind of heard some horror stories before. So I just hope that we all, we're all just working together. And that's kind of one thing that I tried my best on is, make sure you're emailing the SID ahead of time of, I need these files. If there's a special event that, that person needs to tell the team, hey, we're going to have a 10-minute senior day, just incorporate that in your game day email to the SID. Or if it's something, that's not normally that's not in the norm for a game day, like let them know. Or if they're visiting, like, hey, this is where you're going to be, like, how do you enter the gym? So just kind of be, courteous. We're all doing the same thing. And that's one thing that, I hope that we can all get to.
Great answer, Denise. Thank you. Brandon?
Yeah, I want to kind of build on what Denise is saying with regard to game days. I think one piece of advice that really comes to mind is to approach it like you're hosting a party. It's the people that are coming in, media members, radio broadcasters, television broadcasters, scores table crews, student workers, every one of those people I kind of look at as our responsibility, and it's a big one, but to make sure they have a good experience and they have what they need to do their jobs at the game. So I think going above and beyond, and I know all of us are spread so thin, have so many different responsibilities, but to be a good host when you're hosting these events, to communicate with the opposing SID, to make sure that they have everything they need and that radio is all set up. And if there are technological snafus, you can hopefully assist or help find the right person to help them with that. We kind of touched on it, some of the checklist items, but I think in terms of hosting an event, it just comes down to all aspects of being a good host, from arranging parking to stocking the fridge with water, or whatever the little things you can do to go above and beyond to try to make sure that anyone who's helping you by working that game, who's covering your team or broadcasting the game, has a positive experience. I think that goes a long way in terms of some advice for putting on an event as you're just getting going and being a host SID.
Another great answer. Thank you, Brandon. We did get one final question from Brooke again. So Brooke wanted to know another piece of advice about how to get your name out there to be able to find opportunities for interns.
I think it just goes back to, having those relationships. It never hurts to email, your conference office and say, hey, like this person's looking for a job, or looking for, I guess we're finding interns, I should say, or finding opportunities for interns. I don't know.
I believe it's finding opportunities for interns. To be able to help those interns out. Brooke, if you want to clarify, you can, if that interpretation is incorrect, but I believe that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I know in like our area, we have a bunch of NCAA tournaments come up. So you can always reach out to those local tournaments that are around that come through, for opportunities for them if they need volunteers to get more experience. I know that's a big thing in the Greensboro area. ACC tournament has been here. We've hosted a bunch of NCAA tournaments at the Greensboro Coliseum. There's always events happening. It may be a little bit of a different distance, but those could be great opportunities for them.
I would agree. So I worked at the conference side of things, and there's a lot of championships that conferences put on, both for their own conference championships, but at times they also are hosting NCAA events as well. So those are great opportunities for volunteering for those, your time or the intern's time, whoever, and then that's a great way to network as well. A lot of those people want to also go on to other kinds of jobs within athletics. And so I think that's a great opportunity to build up network as well to help with some of that, because at the end of the day, it's definitely a people business. So I would agree with that. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming on today. I thought you guys had a lot of really good questions put into the group chat, so we really appreciate that. I thought everyone did a great job with their questions, and thank you panelists as well for taking the time today. Hope everyone has a great day.